In the year 2199, the space battleship Yamato, Earth's last hope amid the devastating war with the Garmillan Empire, made an epic quest across the stars, defying the odds and braving many dangers in its bid to save the planet and humanity itself. But while the climax of that journey would come in a frenetic battle over the Garmillan homeworld, the Yamato and its crew faced their sternest challenge sometime before that, at the Battle of the Rainbow Star Cluster. This battle, in which Earth's most powerful warship, its most brilliant commander, and its battle-honed crew were pitted against the Garmillan Empire's most brilliant tactician, almost never happened, however. In their previous engagement, in which he had the full might of the Garmillan fleet at his disposal, General Daml came within a hair's breadth of capturing or destroying the Yamato before he and his forces were recalled to deal with the emergency situation surrounding the apparent assassination of Abel Dessler, leader of the Garmillan Empire. Then, in an incident shortly after this, Yamato managed to destroy a critical warp gate, which trapped the vast majority of the Garmillan fleet months away from the Empire's core worlds, and thus unable to intercept it. It was at this point that Lord Dessler, who had in fact survived the assassination attempt, released Daml, who had been falsely accused of being involved in the attempted coup, from prison and tasked him with destroying the Yamato. In addition, he was promised leniency for his wife, who was still in prison due to her alleged involvement in the coup attempt. Daml happily accepted the mission, vowing to carry it out even at the cost of his life. But while he now had the backing of his government once more, Daml's resources were limited. Fortunately for the Garmillans, they could not ask for a better man to command what was, by Garmillan standards, a ragtag force. Although, further complicating the task for Daml, he was also ordered to capture what was believed to be an Iskandarian traveling aboard Yamato before destroying it. General Daml was considered the foremost tactician in the Garmillan military, having won great victories against multiple enemies of the Empire, including Atlantis, in addition to having very nearly destroyed Yamato. Also noteworthy among Garmillan commanders was the level of dedication and loyalty he inspired in his troops, many of whom were as loyal to him personally as they were to the Empire itself. Space Admiral Juzo Okita was not lightly chosen to be the commander of Earth's last hope. A veteran soldier of the Second Interplanetary War, Okita had also played a crucial role in resisting the Garmillan Empire's invasion during the war between Earth and Garmillas. In the Second Battle of Mars, he secured the United Nations' first decisive victory in the war, before joining the Yamato program. Despite his status as Commander-in-Chief of the fleet, and his very serious and possibly fatal illness, he was chosen for this role, as it gave the very risky plan its best chance of success. With the bulk of their irregular fleet trapped months away, and the Home Guard unwilling to land any of their own ships, Daml had to make do with, essentially, the dregs of the fleet. His force consisted of 3 old and outdated Garmillan-class carriers, 1 Gelvades-class battle carrier, 1 Zoelugut-class first-class astral combat vessel, and the dimensional submarine UX-01. Along with these ships, he also had the 442nd Special Operations Platoon, consisting of 4 Zaltzian commandos. The crews of these ships were largely new, inexperienced conscripts, or old reservists called back into service. However, when it came to his command staff, Daml was not lacking, and this would greatly help make up for any shortcomings in the lower-ranking crew. It is worth noting that each of the starfighter groups in the assault force were personally commanded by members of Daml's general staff, who, in normal circumstances, commanded divisions of his 6th Fleet. This was likely a measure taken to shore up troop morale, by seeing their commanders willing to put themselves into the line of fire alongside them. His order of battle was as follows. The carrier Balgray, captained by Colonel Moldovac, carried the force's fighter complement of between 30 and 48 Debake-class starfighters, and the force would be under the direct command of the cool, calm, and collected Major Lyle Ghetto, who had served alongside General Daml for some time, and was, by all accounts, a very skilled pilot. The carrier Lamvia, captained by Colonel Lieutenant Bester, held the force's squadrons of between 30 and 50 Snuka-class dive bombers, commanded by Major Fomtberger, another longtime member of Daml's general staff who, while having a tendency to be a bit hot-headed, was nonetheless a capable commander. The carrier Shadurg conveyed the force's unit of between 30 and 50 Dorisha-class dive bombers, commanded by the quiet but effective Major Charis Krays, yet another longtime member of Daml's general staff. The battle carrier Darold carried a single DBG-88 Garand heavy bomber, and was commanded by Colonel Dula Barrack. The Garand bomber itself was commanded by reservist Captain Vance Barron. The UX-01 dimensional submarine, under the command of Commander Wolf Flacken, carried the Zaltzian Commando Force of the 442nd Special Platoon, Specialized Warfare Group B, and would be tasked with conveying them and the prisoner out of the combat zone once their part of the operation was concluded. The four-man commando team consisted of Second Lieutenant Gerdberger, Master Sergeant Barschmeck, Sergeant Bellis Reich, and Corporal Noran Oschet. While some of the proper Garmillan forces expressed some reservation at working alongside so-called second-class members of the Empire, the commandos were able to allay those concerns prior to the start of the mission. Finally, the first-class astral combat vessel, Daml III, the only ship of the task force to have been a part of General Daml's usual command, operated as the group's flagship, from which Daml commanded his forces, with Colonel Vem Heidern, a longtime friend and comrade of Daml's and a very experienced officer in his own right, in command of the vessel itself. Despite the age of many of these ships and the questionable quality of some of the crew, Daml's task force was a force to be reckoned with. But he would need to bring every asset he could to bear on his quarry in order to have a hope of victory. The IJN Yamato in its time was the pinnacle of Earth military technology, combined with the technological marvels of Iskandar. Well prepared for all eventualities on its long journey, the Yamato was bristling with weaponry, enough to match nearly any equivalent ship in the Garmillan Empire. Its primary armaments were three triple 48cm shock cannons, which fired high-energy positron beams. These cannons were also capable of firing Type 3 explosive shells, giving them a great deal of versatility. In addition, it carried two smaller triple 20cm shock cannon turrets, and sported more than 30 point defense laser emplacements of various kinds amidships. Yamato also carried a large torpedo and missile array, boasting 38 torpedo launchers spread between all sides of the ship, as well as 16 missile launchers, 8 on the dorsal side and 8 on the ventral side. Of course, the Yamato's most defining feature was the massive wave motion gun running along its spine. This superweapon, based on the Iskandar-supplied wave motion engine core, was capable of destroying practically anything in its path. Nearly as important, this wave motion core allowed Yamato to deploy a wave motion shield, which, combined with the ship's prodigious armor, granted it extreme levels of durability. Beyond its personal weaponry, the Yamato carried a large complement of support craft, including at least 24 Cosmo Falcon starfighters, 2 Cosmo Zero starfighters, in addition to several other utility craft. Between all of this, plus its above-average maneuverability, Yamato could be almost considered a small fleet unto itself, and punched far above its weight class. But even so, in the Battle of the Rainbow Star Cluster, it would find itself outnumbered 5-1, and its starfighter complement would find itself engaged in a battle with similarly bad odds. This battle almost did not take place at all. As they traveled, the crew of Yamato faced a decision: either attempt to travel through the treacherous, dangerous Rainbow Star Cluster, or navigate a course around it. The Rainbow Star Cluster is a region inside the Tarantula Nebula, on the edge of the Large Magellanic Cloud. It was so named by both the Terrans and the Garmillans for the 7 degenerate stars which dominate it, and the gas clouds that fill the region, and are ionized by the intense ultraviolet radiation from the stars, turning them a wide spectrum of colors. The ionization in the region also spawns violent and treacherous ion storms, but even within the relatively calm areas free of storms, the interference from the cluster is strong enough to limit the effectiveness of spaceship radars. Additionally, relativistic jets comprised of high-velocity energetic particles are also common, along with gravitic anomalies. All of this combines to make the Rainbow Star Cluster a clear hazard to navigation, and space travelers who know it by reputation or by observation are understandably hesitant to enter it, let alone engage in combat inside of it. Despite the dangers, it was decided by Admiral Okita that they would go through the cluster, both because it was the faster option available, and because, due to the dangers of the area, there was a chance that the enemy would not expect them to make the attempt. However, Okita was too savvy a commander to underestimate his foe, so he ordered all crew to remain on standby for action, including the majority of Yamato's fighter complement, who were all prepped for launch before the battle even began. Unfortunately for the crew of Yamato, Daml understood them too well. Despite several of his officers expressing doubts, he was certain, given his understanding of Yamato's commander, that they would take the risky choice and go through the Rainbow Star Cluster. While not as desperate a gamble as the one taken by Yamato, Daml took a risk here, as, if Yamato had made a different choice, he might have missed them entirely. Additionally, well aware of the deficiencies of the forces at his disposal, Daml knew that an aggressive approach would be necessary, though tailored to allow for the Zaltzian commandos time to accomplish their part of the mission. With his multi-part plan prepared, and his command staff at their stations, he took his fleet into warp. The Yamato was initially unmolested as it arrived in the cluster, and began to traverse some of its more challenging portions. However, the UX-01 had beaten them to the cluster, and, hidden in subspace, it quickly spotted Yamato and relayed the information back to General Daml via a coded message. Now with his confirmation that his hunch had been correct, Daml ordered the operation to commence. Well aware of Yamato's formidable fighter wing that would shred his more vulnerable bombers, Daml had his own fighter wing under the command of Major Geto to launch first from the carrier Belgrade. Their task was to lure away Yamato's starfighter screen and keep them occupied while the rest of the task force attacked the battleship directly. Their approach was picked up on Yamato's sensors despite interference from the unstable cluster, and Admiral Okita scrambled his fighter wing to meet them. Though he kept one of his key assets, an advanced Cosmo Zero starfighter flown by Second Lieutenant Akira Yamamoto, on standby as a last line of defense. Due to the gas clouds and electronic interference in the cluster, both visibility and sensor effectiveness was very limited for both sides, forcing both fighter wings to engage only at visual range, something reminiscent of battles long past. This interference also made missiles largely ineffective, at least against the small targets that were each side's fighters, due to local interference impacting missile guidance systems. With Yamato's starfighters sufficiently occupied and pulled away from his main target, the second phase of the Garmillan operation got underway. After receiving Yamato's active coordinates from one of his scout craft, General Daml ordered the launch of his dive bomber force. Then, once they were all assembled, he activated his secret weapon, an experimental matter transfer device installed on the Domelas, which instantaneously warped the entire dive bomber force to just above Yamato's position. With their target in sight, Major Berger ordered his attack wing to begin their assault. The Yamato's point defense systems managed to destroy a fair number of Berger's Snukas, and the timely deployment of Yamato's Cosmo Zero starfighter would destroy many more. But the attack did its job, inflicting significant, but not crippling damage to Yamato. Most critical was the damage to one of Yamato's catapults, its wave motion shield generator, and its sensors. Daml had timed his first attack wave well. Due to the cluster's interference, Yamato had been unable to raise their wave motion shield in time to defend against the dive bombers. As the dive bomber wing withdrew, the UX-01 made its move, surfacing into real space and deploying the small torpedo boat landing craft, carrying the Zaltzian commando team, who successfully boarded Yamato to carry out their mission. At the same time, Daml ordered the launch of the Garmillan bomber, and used the matter transfer device once more to warp it directly to Yamato's position. Despite the best efforts of Lieutenant Yamamoto in her Cosmo Zero to intercept it, Captain Barron successfully launched his payload, and the modified asteroid drill bomb embedded itself in Yamato's wave motion gun, then began to bore its way into the ship, doing significant damage to engine room systems, and completely disabling Yamato's wave motion gun for the duration of the battle, as its delayed fuse began to count down to detonation. As it began to fall back, the Garand took a number of hits from Yamamoto's Cosmo Zero, and, losing power, was lost in one of the cluster's clouds. Aboard Yamato, the commandos of the 442nd Special Platoon soon located their target, and subdued Lieutenant Yukimori, then began their retreat to the landing craft. However, due to an encounter with Chief of Security Toru Hoshina just prior to that, which forced them to fire their weapons, Yamato's bridge crew was alerted to the boarding action, and a response team was quickly organized under the command of Tactical Officer Susumu Kodai. While the commandos inflicted a number of casualties, the security response team was successfully able to corner them and eliminate Master Sergeant Mech and Sergeant Reich, while wounding Unit Commander Berger. To ensure their mission's success, Lieutenant Berger ordered the last member of the team, Corporal Ashet, to retreat with their quarry as he sealed the door behind them, then self-detonated a grenade to ensure the Yamato crew would not be able to follow. A last-ditch effort by Lieutenant Kodai to launch the Yamato's spare Cosmo Zero to intercept the retreating torpedo boat, failed to stop them as it rendezvoused with the UX-01 and retreated to the safety of subspace. Elsewhere aboard Yamato, the crew had realized the danger of the drill missile and dispatched Lieutenant Kaoru Nimi, who had been incarcerated in the brig due to her role in a failed mutiny, and the robot analyzer to disarm it. While things had largely gone according to plan for the Garmillan task force until this point, things began to quickly unravel. Still engaged with the Garmillan fighter wing as they attempted to return to Yamato, two of Yamato's pilots, Takuya Kobashi and Sho Sawamura, discovered the carrier Balgray as its cloud cover shifted. While Kobashi was soon killed during a reckless, rushed attack run, his missiles hit their mark and inflicted severe damage to the lightly armored carrier, which gave Sawamura an opening to make his own attack run and destroy it. The Balgray's sudden demise had a ripple effect, as, when the news was relayed to the Garmillan Fighter Wing's commander, Major Geto was distracted just long enough for Lieutenant Saburo Kato, commander of Yamato's fighter wing, to shoot him down. With the loss of their skilled and experienced commander, the Garmillan Fighter Wing soon lost all cohesion, and would be wiped out, leaving the remnants of Yamato's fighter wing free to return to aid their stricken vessel. Meanwhile, aboard the Daml, General Daml, despite knowing that the drill missile was due to explode and finish off Yamato, understood that he should not unquestioningly rely on it succeeding, and thus authorized the launch of his torpedo wing under the command of Major Charis Krates to finish off the battleship. These bombers were also warped directly to Yamato's position and immediately launched their attack. But while their torpedoes inflicted heavy damage to the battleship, the attack quickly turned into a disaster, with Yamato's remaining point defense systems, as well as a returning fighter wing and the two patrolling Cosmo Zeros, tearing into them and wiping them all out before General Daml could even begin to act on Major Krates' desperate call for reinforcements. With the drill missile now seemingly having failed to detonate, and Yamato having withstood the torpedo attack, Daml, now realizing that the success of his primary mission was very much in jeopardy, ordered the remnants of his task force to take the fight to Yamato directly. But in doing so, he took the battle to a field in which Admiral Okita held the advantage, as the superior ship commander, and he would take full advantage of every asset at his disposal and the nature of their surroundings to lure the Garmillans into a trap. As they came into range, the battle carrier Darvold opened fire first, inflicting further damage on the beleaguered Yamato. However, at the same time, Lieutenant Nimi and Analyzer set the armed drill missile into a reverse spin, which took it out of Yamato and sent it on a collision course with Daml's task force. As the projectile approached the Darvold, Captain Barak immediately recognized the danger, but his order for evasive action came too late, as Yamato's gunnery officer fired at the missile, detonating it. The ensuing explosion obliterated the Darvold, as well as the carrier Shidurg, and the emergency maneuvers of the task force's remaining two ships allowed Yamato to finally take the offensive, with its shock cannons crippling the carrier Lamvia and sending it plummeting into a nearby cloud. Not finding himself alone, Daml ordered his flagship to open fire on Yamato, and the two capital ships exchanged salvos until the Damlaz suddenly began to lose maneuvering control, with Daml realizing, too late, that he had been led into a trap, amid his single-minded focus on destroying Yamato. Admiral Okita, utilizing his knowledge of the terrain and his tactical ability, had maneuvered Yamato into a position that led the Damlaz straight into the ion turbulence. With flight controls lost, the Damlaz thus became an easy target for Yamato's gunners, and it sustained multiple shock cannon and missile hits. As the stunned Daml quickly realized what had happened, and that the battle was lost, he accepted defeat and began preparing the Damlaz's self-destruct system as a last-ditch attempt to complete his mission at the cost of his own life. With Colonel Hydern and the rest of his bridge crew choosing to remain by his side, instead of attempting to abandon ship, Daml had the autonomous bridge module detached from the main hull of the doomed Damlaz before it, overcome by the ion turbulence and damage sustained, exploded. The bridge module easily caught up to the limping Yamato, and secured itself to the battleship's ventral third bridge, as Daml opened communications with his opposite for the first and final time. Daml offered his genuine congratulations to Admiral Okita and praised his tactical brilliance. He would also turn down Okita's proposal to allow Yamato to peacefully pass, unwilling to abandon his mission after the sacrifice of so many of his men. Daml then activated the self-destruct system, obliterating the Damlaz bridge module and all aboard. Fortunately for Yamato, Chief Science Officer Lieutenant Commander Shiro Sanada and the damage control team had, only moments before the detonation, successfully repaired and activated Yamato's wave motion shield. The Yamato would only suffer minor damage from the detonation. Thus, the Battle of the Rainbow Star Cluster came to its end. The Battle of the Rainbow Star Cluster can conclusively be considered a major, if costly, victory for Yamato, and, by extension, Earth. Garmillan losses were catastrophic and nearly total. General Daml, Colonel Hydern, and all hands were lost aboard the Domelaz 3, as were all hands aboard the Darold, the Balgray, and the Shadurg. The task force's entire complement of Debake-class fighters and their pilots, as well as all Dorisha-class torpedo bombers, were lost, along with their unit commanders, Majors Lyle Ghetto and Charis Craze. The carrier Lamvia would be the sole capital ship to survive on the Garmillan side, but it took a number of casualties among both its crew and its Snuka-class dive bomber complement, though many of those starfighters were lost off the flight deck as the damaged ship sank into the Magellanic Clouds maelstrom. Additionally, the crew of the Garant heavy bomber, including its commander, Captain Vance Barron, survived, rescued by the Lamvia as it conducted repairs after the battle, though the bomber itself was totaled and abandoned. And, while the UX-01 successfully escaped unharmed and without casualties, along with its prisoner, though 3 of the 4-man Zaltian commando team were killed in action, the later discovery that the woman believed to be an Iskandarian, Lieutenant Yuki Mori, was actually an ordinary Terran who happened to bear a striking resemblance to the Iskandarians, made this partial victory a hollow one. While the Yamato emerged victorious, it was far from unscathed. The ship took immense damage, and at least 30 members of its crew, along with 12 of their Cosmo Falcon starfighters and their pilots, were lost, in addition to many lesser casualties. However, their defeat of Daml's task force left their path to their ultimate goal, Iskandar, clear, or so they thought. The Garmillan survivors aboard the Lamvia, under the command of Major Berger, the highest-ranking survivor of the task force, would limp away into open space before being rescued by the Gelvadis-class battle carrier Mirangal some 2 months later. While the Yamato's journey would reach its climax at the Battle of Garmilas sometime later, the Battle of the Rainbow Star Cluster remains the sternest test they faced along their epic journey. And, while brief, Admiral Okita's exchange with General Daml, prior to the latter's death, was the first direct show of respect offered to the Terrans by the Garmillans in a formal capacity, and this perhaps provided one of the key sparks of hope that, one day, the two races could in fact become allies, if not friends. A hope that eventually became a reality.